China has witnessed this week an unprecedented waves of protest across the cities. The experts believe and interpret this protest. It is an outburst of an anger from the masses over the China's much criticized the zero COVID policy. This waves of protest across the main cities, including Beijing, Shanghai, has been quite unprecedented and unexpected by the leaders, including the Xi Jinping, the president of China. Xi Jinping recently got elected third term as a president from the 20th Chinese Communist Party Congress, and the entire world seen this development quite new, that China, Xi Jinping has totally controlled not only the party but also the entire China by re-electing himself in the third term. And this would also sort of create the more centralized authoritarian system in China. That is what the political observers say about the Chinese development. Immediately after these things happened, there is a series of protests happening in the China, which is the unexpected by the authorities. What is the reason for this protest, and how China has handled it and is handling it, and what are the political impact of this protest for China, as well as what are the lessons and the takeaways of this protest, which is still ongoing for the rest of the world. Although this protest has been dubbed as the Tiananmen Movement 2.0, all of you know that the 33 years back, a single man, termed as the tank man, that captured the imagination of the world, and especially those who believe in democracy, that China is facing a new sort of revolution. After that 33 years, there was no massive such protest happened. And this is a sort of a new development that is happening in China at a time when China is going through economic slowdown. It has been 3 years since the COVID outburst happened, but China's yet to recover from its economic slowdown and sluggishness. And being a global manufacturing hub, it is still struggling to cope up with the pace. In this context, what triggered this massive protest? The answer is very obvious from the media sources that we have seen, that it is a strict zero COVID policy by the Chinese authorities, especially the Chinese authorities. That has been imposed ever since the new variant of COVID-19, Omicron, broke out in the early of this year, in the January of this year. What is the zero COVID policy that the Chinese government has imposed? The zero COVID policy, the government authorities claim that it is a dynamic zero COVID policy to prevent and contain the spread of Omicron, although the Omicron variant is not lethal as compared to these previous variants. But this imposition of the strict guidelines, which restricted the movement of people in general, and particularly the students in particular. So as a result, what happened, that the government has come out with the policies of made mandatory for anyone to enter any premises, public premises, to carry the PCR test results, and they should test it negative. And moreover, if anyone is found tested positive, and they will be quarantined at the government supervised facilities, which is not maintained properly, and it is not in a good condition. So this has been prevalent across the major cities, and the Chinese government has been for the last 6-7 months, as we all know, that the government, how they suppress these sort of negative things, comes out of the criticism of the policies. But what triggered this particular incident is, the last month there is a fire accident in a high-rising building in Xinjiang, in Urumqi in Xinjiang province, where the visuals of the building, which is the government COVID containment facility, quarantine facility, were caught fire, and the people were helpless, and the fire service brigade did not arrive on time. And although they arrived and there was no water in that, so the 4 or 5 people in the building burnt alive. And that has triggered sort of anger against the way in which the government is handling this COVID and putting the restrictions on the masses. It is also quite unprecedented. The successive government in the past, the Chinese government maintained that any protest, any anger against the government is dubbed as the foreign intervention, the foreign hand. But this time the government authorities are not subscribed or believing that argument, because the government has entirely sealed the borders. So anyone who wanted to enter China, even the foreigners enter China, they have to strictly go through the 7 days strict quarantine things, and local in provincial borders are also sort of sealed. After that incident, there was another major road accident happened in which more than 25 people, the COVID patient they were on the way to the COVID quarantine center. That bus met with an accident and they also died. So these two things. The latest is the trigger point is the 14-year-old boy died out of not proper attendance to the patient in the government run facilities. So all this combined created a sort of a sense of frustration among the mass, and also the COVID fatigue that continued, and as a result of the way in which the Chinese government has handled the COVID-19 policy. You may ask that the Chinese government has almost administered vaccine among more than 90% of this population, but still 60% of the population remains to be vaccinated, and some of them being given administered booster doses. But the point is, the China has been very adamant, and the authority is very adamant to allow any foreign vaccines. Although there are a lot of questions about the effectiveness of the Sinopharm, and why the China is not allowing other vaccines to be given the choice for the people. So that has also been questioned. Given this, but it is yet to relax that norm, although despite this World Health Organization insisting on that. So the major cities like Wuhan, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, these cities are the major cities have been erupted in, particularly the youths and students erupted and coming out to the public and protesting against the authorities. And authorities also find it, unlike the Tiananmen Square episode, which is a sort of a political protest. The day the Chinese president got re-elected as the party chief, as well as party chairman, and as well as to seek the next third term in the month of October by the party congress, a man who went on to a bridge in the Beijing city and unfurled a banner which calls for criticizing the government and asking the Xi Jinping to step down, and calling the people to come forward to the streets and protest for freedom and right to vote. So the imagination that picture has gone viral in the social media. Of course, the Chinese authorities have removed that particular content in the social media. You won't find it, but his portrait was very going viral in the portrait. So that is a sort of a message that the mass are not happy with the Xi Jinping's way in which he is handling the COVID-19, and there is a strong resentment amongst the public, particularly the section of the youth. The police authorities are also not able to suppress effectively, because their family members also going through the same sort of trauma. They have been also restricted, their entry has been restricted. But now the question you may ask, that whether whether it will lead to a big revolution, a democratic revolution. My answer is, I don't think so. The Chinese authority will definitely able to suppress this revolution, and moreover, it is not a well organized protest or revolution. Mostly they have used the social media platform like Telegram and WhatsApp groups to mobilize the people, and it is so divided and fragmented, but the angst was common. And it is also called the white paper revolution, because the people were being hunted, those who are protesting and coming forward to protest against these government policies and suppressive policies, and they were just coming with the A4 sheet, plain sheet. The meaning is to convey to the authorities, see, we don't have anything, we don't say or we don't write anything against you. We'll just simply show the plain paper, but the answer is already there in the viewer's mind. They know they know why we are showing the plain paper, because if any criticism in written form or even in the social media, that person has been individually targeted and hunted, either arrested or intimidated. So this is a new thing that the government is facing. Although the Xi Jinping has maintained that this is surely I also admitted that this is the students are frustrated, they can't go to the schools and colleges, and they have been quarantined, and the people are also finding it difficult to manage the day-to-day life. The another important factor happened is this: there is a huge protest in the Foxconn, which produces iPhone in China's famous economic zone, where the huge protest from the factory workers against the strict COVID policies. The point is that the Chinese authorities first they don't know how to contain or they prevent this COVID-19, and the policies sort of now it is very much evident that it has been it is a failure, big failure, the way China handled the crisis, and still the lockdown is imposed. If you compare it with India, you can see that we have best managed, and in terms of administering the vaccination. And relaxing the lockdowns and opening up the education institutions, so that angst and anger has sort of not there in the accumulated among the masses, but whereas China it still feel. So as a result, what happened in recently, yesterday the Chinese government has relaxed this COVID-19, the zero COVID-19 policies. So this is an impact of this large protest which has started simmering for the last 1 month, and finally the outburst came. How the international community look at this protest? The Westerners, obvious, they have been interpreting this event as this is a new generation of the youth in China, are very much critical of this authoritarian the Chinese thing, and also it has created a dent in the Xi Jinping's image as the supreme leader. He wanted to become a supreme leader, and that is the one interpretation the international community see from that. But obviously everybody would know that the government go to any extreme end to suppress this protest, although it is not a sort of a well organized movement. With the lessons also we learned from the Tiananmen incident also, any student movement it is easy for the authority to dilute, and that is also news coming out from the China major cities. They wanted to contain this protest so that it won't spill over into other small cities, urban, semi-urban areas, or even to the rural areas, because that's very sensitive, and the government find it very difficult to manage as well. We still don't know, the international community don't know what is happening, how the COVID, the China is handling the COVID situation in the rural areas. That is also we still don't know. But the lessons from the Tiananmen Square indicates that I don't think so there will be a massive youth revolution or big protest as it happened in the Velvet Revolution, or even the Pink Revolution in the Central Asian states, or even in the Tunisia, or recently the Belarus protest has been called as a telegram revolution against the authoritarian regime. But I find that the Chinese failed to read this angst coming out of the lockdown. A few months back there was a protest in Netherlands, some of the European countries, against the strict lockdowns and containment strategy by the government. I think the Chinese could have learned something from that and could have eased their policies, but it is the authoritarian model that has imposed that. But what is Xi Jinping, the relaxing the COVID policy, he wanted to say that this is not the policy of the center, where rather the local governance has poorly or badly implemented this zero COVID policy, and so it distanced itself from the local administration or governance. Moreover, the overall, if you see the Xi Jinping re-elected, and now China's he has consolidated his power within the party and also in the country, so there won't be any space for any dissent to challenge the Xi Jinping's policies or his reign. But that indicates the new era of Chinese leadership has begun. In the 20 years back, when Hu Jintao's Jiang Zemin, he also passed away last week, and there's a huge mourning of Jiang Zemin. They were seen as a decentralized, that's a political reform that they were talking about in the 90s and the early 2000s, to decentralizing or sharing of power, but that era is gone now. Now the new era is more of centralized policies. So the two things is going to test the Xi Jinping's in the coming decades, his authority or his policies. the new youths and the urban middle class in China, when at a time when the Chinese economy is now registering less than 3% GDP growth, although they expected that it would grow more than 5%, 5.5%, and the Ukraine and Russian war has also complicated the Chinese economic revival or the rebound in the coming years. So all this had a cumulative effect on the government policies, and it is going to be a big challenge. I think the Xi Jinping would have learned from this protest that how to adjust the policies and be open to the criticism and dissent, especially from the masses. Otherwise, this will leave for an open interpretation from the international community. He had to face the question from the international community on the human rights and issues, which he doesn't want to. So overall, this is a sort of a big challenge for the Chinese Xi Jinping. And next coming years, the third term is going to be more troublesome and more turbulent and challenges for Xi Jinping. If you ask me, sir, if you ask me if there is any lesson for India to learn, or does it affect India's sort of China, it reflect in the India-China relationship? I don't think so it will affect, because it's surely India see it as an internal incident, but although India is closely watching the factors and the other events, how it has unfolded in China in the recent one months, and the policies, how the government missionaries are responding to that. So that is, we are closely watching on that front, and I think it is a sort of if you compare the India and in Asia, India and China in this, we stand in a better position, that we have very ably handled the COVID-19. Although we have a huge mass, more than the second largest population, we have handled this COVID-19. So overall, the year 2023 from going to be more challenges for the Chinese policies, and they will be very more cautious and more receptive to the ground. That is what I see, to see what the youths are reacting to the policies, government policies, especially domestic policies. Also, there are other simmering sort of a skepticism about Xi Jinping's the much dream pet project of the Belt and Road Initiative. So the skepticism coming from those dissent who are now either out of the China, or the scholars, they are criticizing this has drained the Chinese economy and drained Chinese wealth. So China is investing in the overseas, especially the least developed countries, and they're turning them into a debt. And how are they going to repay the debt, and how Chinese are going to handle, and what will be the repercussions? So this policy, whether it is a sort of an image prestige issue for the Xi Jinping. I see that he makes it ensure that he would succeed in that Belt and Road Initiative, although it has been created a lot of international criticism, and some of them, even the countries who have a part of it, are now feeling that they wanted to get out of this BRI projects. So the domestic resentment obviously again may spiral, that if economy registers a low growth, and the manufacturing the companies like Foxconn and all, they move out of China and shift to elsewhere, including India, and I think that is going to be a big challenge, the economic policy as well. Thank you.